Hey listeners, if you like this podcast, check out our other show, The Dinner Table. Listen to archived content and in-depth interviews with insiders and innovative people working with food. It's on our website, www.fredopie.com. Welcome to Study Table, a conversation about student athletes with players, coaches, parents, and insiders. I'm your host, Fred Opie, a former Division I athlete and a college professor today. Today's podcast is a conversation with the University of Pennsylvania head lacrosse coach, Mike Murphy. Coach Murphy is one of the sport's best young coaches who has turned the Quakers program around and back into the NCAA tournament. He talks about his recruiting style, challenging his players to grow as people, and the governing principles that guide his program. Enjoy the show. I'm really excited to talk to Mike about a number of subjects, and I'm very thankful to him that he shared an email that came from the parent of one of his former players. And there's some themes in that I hope to unpack in our discussion today. First, Mike, thank you for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure, Fred.
You know, Mike, one of the things that came up in the letter that so impressed me is topics that I talked to with a number of the people that I interviewed for the show. And one of them is recruiting style. This particular parent complimented you on your recruiting style. How would you describe your recruiting style?
I guess most basically, I think of recruiting more as a relationship process than kind of sales, you know. And I've been fortunate to be in places that I truly believe in, and Penn being one of those places that I would go or would want my children to go. So I guess I'm fortunate in that regard. But it's really just a matter of, I think, being honest with people and telling them, what their experience would be like, and really looking for the right fit. Most of these kids and families are looking for a school that fits what they're looking for, and we're looking for the right kind of kid and family as well.
Would a prospective athlete for you, should they expect a lot of emails, text? Are they going to see you at certain showcases? Or do you do a lot of home visits? How do you work it?
Yeah, it really varies a lot, and certainly in our sport, for better or for worse, probably for worse, the recruiting process has gotten much earlier. So we're spending more of our time, really recruiting 10th graders and even 9th graders.
Wow.
And so we can't really email them. We follow all the NCAA rules, obviously. But so the extent of our contact with them is really when they come to campus and visit the place. We can show them around and talk to them. So really, I guess the tactics of recruiting have changed somewhat over the last, certainly the 7 years that I've been at Penn. So really, our opportunities to give them information is somewhat more limited than it used to be, and the style with which we do it has changed too.
Mike, I know you spent some time as an assistant at UVA, a school that has scholarship money. I wonder, again, it's been a long time since you've been there, but what is the difference when you're recruiting at a great institution like UVA with money and a great institution like UPenn that has a lot of cachet but doesn't have the cash to hand out?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of subtle differences. At the end of the day, they're both, very good schools with good lacrosse. But really, the scholarship thing, it makes a difference from an ego perspective and from a financial perspective. And for some of those, and we're lucky, at Penn, there's a very, very significant endowment, and the financial aid is extremely strong. And so for the families that need the money, they get it, and I'm sure in certain cases they would get more financial aid from an Ivy than they would scholarship from some of the bigger, kind of BCS athletic departments, because lacrosse is an equivalency sport, so they have to spread out 12.6 scholarships across a roster of 45. But really, at the end of the day, the scholarship conversation comes down to whether they're looking at something in more of a short-term horizon in terms of the 4-year cost of it versus the long-term horizon in terms of kind of return on your investment of a college or university. So and everybody's different, and stylistically too, it depends on what somebody's looking for, type of education, type of environment, things like that. So
So let me ask you, there are so many venues that players are playing with. A lot of the coaches that I've talked to lately have told me that a challenge that they have is first-year players coming in with overuse injuries. It's happening all the time. Now, the flip side of this is a coaching staff of, say, how many is on your coaching staff?
We have 3 full-time and 1 volunteer assistant.
All right, so you're talking, say, 3 full-time people. I would imagine they're all involved in recruiting. How do you go about systematically seeing players when there are so many great tournaments and showcases?
Yeah, it's hard, I mean, you really kind of have to pick your spots, and the 2 ways to go about it are, one, kind of a quality perspective where you try to go to the best events. But I'm not so sure, for us, in the 2 real times of the year when we recruit are summertime, kind of mid-June through the end of July, and then November. In a given weekend, in either of those windows, there could be 5, 6 events, and 2 or 3 of them could all be fairly even in terms of the quality of the event and the teams there. So at that point, it's just a matter of kind of picking your spot. But for us, we'll obviously want to go to the better event, but I'm not so sure that's always an apples and oranges conversation. And so for us, it sometimes will come down to geography. We try to recruit the local kids as well as we can, and do well. Really kind of along the mid-Atlantic as much as we can, where people have a greater appreciation for what Penn is. So the first I guess differentiator will be quality of event, but usually there's not a drastic difference, and then it will come down to, for us, certain kids we're looking for, or maybe the geographical makeup of the teams attending that event.
Interesting. As you know, I played at Syracuse for Roy Simmons, and I think without a doubt, people would say the biggest surprise recruits, that is plural, were Paul and Gary Gate. And Paul and Gary,
Yep.
And Paul and Gary Gate, they were seen by somebody who then referred them to Coach Simmons. And I'll never forget. This is when I was still playing club ball for Long Island Lacrosse Club, and one of my teammates was coaching at Adelphi. And Delphi had just played Syracuse, and he came to practice after that, and his eyes were just like saucers. He goes, "You won't believe what I've just seen." Like nobody knew where these guys came from. I wondered, in your experience at Penn, who have been the recruits that are, certainly not the Hall of Famer maybe as Gary Gates, but kid or a couple kids that came on the field, and you're going, wow, you say to your assistant, where did you get these guys from? Can you think of any players that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, those kids have come up for years, and I think, you look back to the mid-'80s when people are pulling kids out of a hat, so to speak, and just kind of, lesser heard of names. And part of that's because the recruiting is so much more evolved now, there are events in Canada, and people are going out and finding those guys and actively looking for the Paul and Gary Gates of the world. So that's not really feasible to find a kid that nobody else has ever heard of even. And it's just, there's so much more of an active network, where nowadays Paul and Gary Gates, coach in Canada is going to be calling college guys on their behalf and things like that. So I think recently there have been a lot of kids. I think Loyola College, or I guess Loyola University now, does a great job of finding kids that other people didn't quite find or notice, or they do a good job of developing them. And I think Cornell has always done a great job of developing their players and things. And a lot of it too, and this is really the inherent challenge, is that you just can't measure kind of commitment and passion for the game and heart when we're recruiting at these different events or wherever we're recruiting kids. You can certainly see some tangibles and some intangibles in terms of competitive nature and athleticism and technical skills, but you can't in a 2-hour period, even over a 6-month period of recruitment or whatever it is, find out how badly a kid wants to be great. And Paul and Gary clearly just had a real strong passion and commitment to the sport, and you combine that with their talent, and you get as good an offensive player as I've ever seen. And so I think recently even when I was at Virginia, Doug Knight kind of comes to mind as somebody that, a little under the radar. Certainly other people recruited him. We were not the only ones, but, he was from Westminster, and he was looking at schools for hockey and soccer as well, and, considering some Division III options and Ivy League options and things like that. And sure enough, he shows up and a little unorthodox with his style, and he turns into, National Player of the Year a couple years later. So, and I think recently, like I said, the kid Justin Ward at Loyola was fantastic, and part of that I think is the good job that they did developing him. But somebody a little under the radar, and we had a guy at Penn named Max Meyer and another guy named Zach Laska, both graduated 2 years ago. And by the time they were seniors, they were, I think, as good as anybody in the country at their position. A defensive and a midfielder that somewhat recruited, but not kind of the 4-star recruit or the blue chip recruit that people talk about that end up being, kind of leaders on top 5, top 10 teams.
I've talked to a number of people that tell me that right now, as far as like the hotbeds, historically, me growing up, it's Baltimore, it's Long Island, and then by the time I'm at Syracuse, upstate New York has clearly established itself as a hotbed. There were a lot of kids from upstate New York who would just stay upstate, and that was it. But now they're going all over the place. They tell me now that the best ground for recruiting people is Pennsylvania. And I wondered, have you seen that, and how do you explain Lacrosse and Philly and Pennsylvania, mostly Philadelphia is the area I'm thinking about, but how do you explain the explosion of so many great players coming out of Philadelphia? I'm thinking about the Hill School as well as people in the prep schools in and around Philadelphia.
Yep. Well, I'm a little biased. I've been here for 15 years, so I've always been feeling that way. And then just, philosophically, I just believe in recruiting your area, and so we've been doing that. And I have felt for a long time that Pennsylvania is as good an area to recruit from as there is. It's nice to know that other people feel that way too. I think the reason for it is really simple, that there's no limitation to the growth of it. Whereas Long Island, you're not going to get any more high schools on Long Island. It's landlocked, and I can't figure out the Baltimore thing. It's those same 8 MIAA schools that have been really good in lacrosse for as long as anybody can remember. And I don't know why they haven't been able to add any. There's somewhat of a monopoly down there amongst those top 6 or 8 schools, and in Philadelphia it's been the opposite. I think the best example by far is LaSalle, where Bill Leahy graduates from Loyola College, and then in, I think, 1990 or 91, and comes up here and literally starts that program from scratch, and then wins, multiple state championships and sends kids on to all the best programs in America, and, world team guys and things like that. That program did not exist 25 years ago, and now it's as strong a high school program as there is. And that's just one example here in Pennsylvania. Obviously, John Nostrand at Haverford, Conestoga and Radnor, the public schools, and Springfield, and they're just in Central Bucks and Westchester. The urban sprawl here in Philadelphia has allowed people like Bill Leahy to move here, and there are a million other guys. Just in my town alone, in the town of Radnor, it's crazy. Doug Knight lives there, Tim Goldstein lives there, Dennis Goldstein lives there. John Beezer lives there, long stick from Virginia. Bill Gallagher played Notre Dame. These are all parents of kids in 2 or 3 grades. It's wow. Crazy. And so you just get people that have grown up in other areas and gone to colleges in other areas that end up in Philly for one reason or another, professional or personal. And they end up coaching, those names I just listed, coach the middle school team in Radnor. So, the high school, and John Beezer coaches the high school team here. So it's a microcosm of, I think, what you're looking at in terms of the growth of the game here in Philadelphia.
We'll be right back. For more interviews and related content, go to www.fredopie.com. Ask questions on Facebook at www.facebook.com/The Fred Opie Show, and on Twitter at Fred Opie Show. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com. Now back to the show. No, I heard you talk about the players, their ability when you see them play, and then the intangible. And I heard you mention passion. Would that be the most important intangible for you on the field? And then I imagine there's some intangibles that you have to have as a Penn athlete off the field. So tell me a little bit about that when you look at who you're going to put in your recruiting pool.
Yeah, I mean, on the field, I think the biggest thing we look for is really kind of a competitive fire from an intangible standpoint. And you could see it. I remember Kevin McGary's now one of our best middies as a sophomore, and you could just see that in him. He's extremely competitive. You could tell that in, even the random, some of these fall tournaments, these kids are playing on different club teams, and the whole club thing is really just a commodity and a kind of a means to an end. There's not a lot of passion in that, I don't think, just because of the framework of it. But clearly Kevin McGary wanted to win every single game he played in, even though you play 3 games a day and you had reversible jerseys and things like that. And then we have a freshman from Rhode Island named Joe Licciardi, who I could see the same thing, and you could just tell the kid was competitive and really wanted to win. And then once you get to know kids, for us, the number one thing really is integrity and character, or whatever you want to call it. We have one team rule: do the right thing the right way. And that.
Whoa, Coach, slow down. Say that again.
Okay. We have one team rule in our program: it's do the right thing the right way, and that's it. And so we want.
Tell me about the history of that. How did you come to? I love it. I mean, that's why I want you to talk about. When did you lock onto that, and how did you lock onto that team rule?
I don't know. I really don't. I'm sure I got it from somebody or cobbled 2 or 3 things together that I heard from different sources. When I went to Haverford College, that was the rule we created, and that was, I guess, 14 or so years ago now. It's evolved a little bit in terms of its utilization and function, but it's been pretty consistent with me and everything I've done and believed in terms of being a head coach. So do the right thing the right way is the only rule we have. Now we have a whole series of guidelines or expectations or whatever, but at the end of the day, that kind of guides. And for me, my job is really twofold. I think, and I think my bosses and the people I'm accountable to agree with me. One of them is to win lacrosse games, and the other is to prepare these guys for life after Penn. And if a guy is 28 years old and facing a difficult personal or business decision, and he looks at that rule, do the right thing the right way, generally speaking, you can figure it out. So hopefully that rule pertains to the way we go about lacrosse and the way we go about our schoolwork and the way we live our lives, and something they carry with them beyond Penn.
Well, the thing I tell you I really like about that is, first of all, having a principle that guides what you do on and off the field, I think is great. And it doesn't mean do the right thing the right way when people are looking. It means do it all the time. That's the thing.
Exactly.
And that's the problem we have in our culture now is people have their public persona and then people have their private persona. And
absolutely.
And when they send the wrong thing out via Twitter, then you get to find out a lot of stuff. So
you know who the real person is, and especially in our sport. We've had so many things go wrong that most of our major media coverage has been negative. That's why I think it's so important that all of us just live our lives the right way, one day at a time, and people will get to know what the real lacrosse community is like, and we don't have to take out an advertisement or have some sort of major media coverage for people to know that, because I think the more we do things the right way and live our lives the right way and do things in the community, whether it's our Young Quakers program or Metro Lacrosse or Headstrong folks raising cancer funds and awareness, that's who we are as a sport, I'd like to think. And hopefully every one of our college programs is generating young men that think and act that way when they graduate from our programs every year.
One of the things about the culture of our sport when I was coming up through the ranks is that people had this attitude, and I think it was kind of pervasive that you play hard, party hard.
Yep.
I'm wondering, because the sport has become so competitive, has that weeded out that negative part of the culture? Because can you afford to play hard and party hard and still be competitive? Has that changed, or is it still a part of our sport that we need to work on getting rid of?
Yeah, I think it will always be part of our sport, and a lot of varsity college athletes, have some confidence. That's part of how they got there, and that I think tends to extend itself into the social lives of student athletes, male and female. I definitely think, though, that your first point is 100% accurate, that you just can't. I mean, you take the average social life of a varsity Division I lacrosse player in the 80s, and you put that on a team today, they are going to struggle. They are going to really struggle. And a lot of the teams that have kind of broken through their ceiling, if you will, and gotten to the Final Fours and national championships, really have done it through severely curtailing their social lives. Whether it be ACC schools or somebody else. I've talked to a bunch of coaches that mentioned that as one of the primary reasons for their new levels of success.
Well, and do you think that message has, it sounds to me like you're saying that even among the coaching ranks, that the coaches are hearing the difference between our success this year and, say, 5 years ago is that we've asked more of a commitment off the field from our players, and it's translated.
No question. At the end of the day, and one of the reasons I'm comfortable with our rule, and I don't write, we have a drug and alcohol and behavior policy that our players wrote, because I'm not going to be there on a Friday night. So at the end of the day, if I'm trying to implement an alcohol policy, it's going to be a game of cat and mouse and just trying to catch them, which will be hard to do. At the end of the day, these kids have to take ownership of that, and if they're committed, and they all have to be now, by and large, because we ask so much of them in terms of the weight room and off-field things, on-field things. It's hard not to be fairly committed if you're going to just be a part of one of these teams. But I think the more that comes from the players, the more that culture improves. And like I said, I think we'll always have a couple guys here and there that have a pretty strong social agenda. But I certainly think relative to 20 or 30 years ago, it's a much smaller percentage of each team.
I remember, as you were talking, I was thinking about the UVA team who won the national championship. I think it was still Stanwyck's senior year, or maybe his junior year. And I remember that one of the starting midfielders was benched. And he was benched by the team captains because and then two of the players, the Bratton twins, were thrown off the team. And it seemed to me, from everything I could unpeel, that the team captains took the lead there, that we have principles, you violated, we're a team, there's no I, sit down. And I just thought, and the fact that they made those decisions, I mean, terrific players that they made the decision to bench, and they won. I just thought that was a message that hopefully began that process of what you're saying of cleaning up and policing your own team as players and not just a coaching staff, because you're right, coaches can't go out and see what's going on.
Right, exactly. That's a perfect example, and I think that's part of. I think it was part of our sport evolving and understanding that A, the lacrosse was more important than the social life, and B, no one player is more important than the team, and they certainly, I think, stuck their neck out there as a team and got rid of their two most talented players possibly. But that was certainly an example of doing the right thing the right way, leading to wins when you wouldn't necessarily think of it that way.
One of the other themes that came up in the email that came from the parent of one of your former players was that they compliment you on challenging boys to grow into contributing adults. And it reminded me of one of the best books I've read on coaching and parenting, and that's Joe Ehrmann's Inside Out Coaching. Have you read the book? Has that infused or guided at all some of the things you do, or was it something else that contributed to this ideal? My job is not just to win games, but to turn boys into men.
I'm embarrassed to say I have not read the book. I have a copy of it, and it's on my list, a long list of books I'm trying to read over the next few months and years. But I did read his first book, so I'm sure there's a significant portion of Joe Ehrmann's message in kind of the way we coach and things. So I just, I think I've gone through this. I haven't worked for Bob Stars yet. Just watching the way he does things. Some of the guys that I've played for, coached for, I guess, I'm taking a lot of lessons from a lot of people and just different role models and things. I'm constantly reading books and trying to evolve. I call it our culture, and I think I'm doing really well. I have a conference call today at noon with a guy who works with the Ohio State football team on their culture and things, and it's the same idea. There's so much crossover, doing the right thing the right way in the field, and it's exactly what you said. It's just a matter of it's kind of personal discipline. Do you do the right thing when nobody's watching and when there are 10,000 people watching in the stands?
Mm-hmm. The other thing that the parents said was that you challenge both the players and the parents to be positive role models. Tell me a little bit more about parenting. Again, another theme that comes up when I talk to friends of mine. And, the thing to say to my listeners is, I've played, I've coached, and now I'm a college professor, and I'm in contact with a lot of my friends who are either people I played against, played with, or one way or the other, and we know each other, and they're coaches. And they say whether it's the high school level, youth level, or college level, that dealing with parents can be rough. What are some of the things that you've learned to create a positive relationship with parents, and what are some of the rough spots that you've had to learn along the way? I got to do this differently.
Yeah, I've evolved, I think, considerably. I've learned a lot of lessons, and I used to really kind of keep the parents at arm's length, just to not, let them get too close to me, thinking that they could have influence. But I just realized, I think, over time that being candid with them and letting, just being honest with them, they know where the line is 9 times out of 10. I think in 15 years, I've had one parent email me about, playing time or anything like that, just kind of crossing the line. And I've had, dozens of emails like the one I sent you that really more along the lines of thanks. I think if you let them in and you're honest with them, I think you can have a better relationship than, keeping them at bay and just worried about, we have 42 kids in our team, 22 of them are not going to play. Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. So it may be that the fear of the interviewing parents may be causing some of the problems when you keep them at bay instead of embracing. It's funny. It reminds me of Abraham Lincoln when the year he ran for president and won, his biggest rivals, his opponents, he made them members of his cabinet.
Yeah, team of rivals, exactly.
So having those guys on the inside did more for him than having them on the outside, shooting missiles of complaint, outside the cabinet.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, keep your friends close, your enemies closer, but it's really more, like for me at least, and I think we're lucky in some respects that we have such good parents here, like the woman that wrote that email, but it's just being honest with them, having a good relationship with them, and we have so many constituencies here, whether it's administration, alumni, team, parents, other coaches. And we just, try to be honest and upfront with everybody and treat them the right way. And the golden rule, do unto others. And it seems to be the way it works for us here at Penn,
I have, as a professor and as a coach, because I'm still involved in youth coaching, this Super 7. And they're just principles that I teach my students, and I also teach, the people who I coach, and the basic things: communications, evaluation, managing people, planning, preparation, style, technology. I want to ask you just a couple of those things and how you do them. The last time I coached at the college level was at Gettysburg College, worked with Hank Jancic, a great coach, and I was a defensive coordinator. And one of the things I remember doing that worked extremely well, very similar to what you're saying about the honesty and being candid. I used to, on a weekly basis, we played on Saturday usually, so Friday before Thursday, I'd have my 11 defensemen, and I'd tell them, I'd rank them right in front of them, and I didn't rip them. It wasn't the movie Paper Chase. It was considerate, but I would rank them and tell them why you were number 11 or why you were number 1. And of course, you got 3 guys that are playing. You got some long poles that be playing, some short poles that be playing. But everybody knew where they stood, and it was one of the best things I could do. It motivated players who were number 4, who thought they should be number 3 or number 1. And there was one guy that I'm going to mention. He was an undersized player, a guy named John Colucci from Long Island. One of these guys who you're saying, when you looked at him size-wise, why is he playing? But he had an engine that just kept him on the field. He had a work ethic, and it made a huge difference in pushing players to be better. Do you do anything when it comes to evaluating your players so they know where they are on the depth chart?
Yeah, well, we actually I have the evaluation board that's magnetic. We have a small magnet with every player's name on it. Each player has his own magnet. And so anytime a guy wants to know where he stands, we evolve that depth chart on pretty much a weekly basis, if not daily. And so the kid wants to see where he is, he can come in. So I've done it in the locker room, and I've not done it. But I think if a kid wants to know where he stands, then he can come in and look at the board, and he can talk to me about it or his position coach about it, and what he needs to do to move up. And we have those conversations all the time. Here, and it's all the same lines, exactly what you're talking about. It's just an honest, open discussion, not being critical, just being candid. And the other thing we do, I usually do it once a year, I haven't done it yet this year, is we have the whole team create a depth chart, and they put themselves in it. And that allows me to just kind of get some general feedback and see if everybody else is seeing what our coaching staff is seeing, what I'm seeing, but also allows you to find out how kind of realistic each kid is in terms of where he puts himself in that depth chart. And you see that there's some variance. A committee might have himself rated as a fourth-rated mid in the team, and the average across the rest of the team is like ninth. And that guy's got a little bit of a skewed view of himself.
I like that. I hope people who listen to that take up that philosophy process as well. The other thing I want to ask you about is the principle I have of preparation. My show I called Study Table, and anybody who knows sports knows when you go off and play college sports, particularly at Division I level, that freshmen are required to go to study table, where they're going to sit down a first semester in a group with other athletes with somebody who's going to supervise them and make sure that they're getting their work done. If you work to a certain GPA at Syracuse, then you were off the study table. Do you use a study table, and have you seen it used at the other schools? You worked at Brown, Haverford, and you worked at UVA. Do you use the study table? What's your take on study table?
We do use it. And here in the athletic department at Penn, there's a study hall policy, but we have one that's actually a little more rigorous, I guess. And the one at Penn is like most of the other ones that I've seen, and that it's really based on kind of eligibility factors, where if you start to get below the line of what would make you eligible, they'll put you in study hall. But for us, it's really more a matter of being successful. And so anybody that has below a 3.0 on our team has study hall at 7 a.m. every Tuesday, and it's a little bit punitive, and the freshmen are in there right away, and you have to earn your way out, basically. And so it works pretty well, and I think it's consistent with the people we're trying to attract, the recruits, and why they choose Penn, that this is a long-term investment. And it's about, growing up and being responsible and being hardworking and getting good jobs. And it's a lot easier to get a good job with a 3.2 GPA than it is with a 2.8. So I've got to understand that. We have alumni come back and speak to our team about the importance of those things. So I think it's that we do use it, and we rely on it heavily. And I think it's kind of an important part of our program and consistent with everything we talk about.
I think it's a great idea of coaches leveraging their alum to come back and say, this is what the staff is doing and why it's important. I'm out here and I can tell. I think it's a great idea, and more people should do it, whether it's live or via Skype, is get your alums to come back and get involved. I love that. The other one I wanted to ask you about is, the whole idea of just keeping in the planning part of the Super 7. I talk about planning. One of the greatest things about playing for Roy Simmons was that we were fresh. He didn't burn us out. There are coaches that I don't think they realize that when you don't win, it doesn't mean more. It means change, but it doesn't necessarily mean another hour or 30 more minutes of practice. So on average, we would practice about 90 minutes. Now, I will say this, and anybody hears it will agree or disagree, but we played in 2 national championships my junior and senior year, and we lost to Hopkins both years. I think more than anything else, I think we got out-coached. And I think the Hopkins ability to have alumni out there and see you play, watch film, break down film, look, tendencies. So that's my argument. But I still think that practice was fun. It was enjoyable. We loved playing for my coach. What do you do as far as practice, how much time you do? How do you change that from, say, fall ball to regular season, beginning of the season, end of the season? What can you tell us?
Yeah, we really evolved, and so we're pretty intense. We only go 3 days a week in the fall, kind of throughout the fall with traditional fall season and practice, and then our workouts. and that ramps up in January, and then in February, it's 6 days a week. And then when we get to probably mid-March, it depends on whether we have one game or a week or 2 games, we start to really pull it back to try to get our guys' legs and things like that. So I think we made the NCAA tournament in 2011 and just didn't perform real well down the stretch and things. So I spent some time with some coaches that have won national championships and picked their brains on exactly how they do adjust the physical intensity over the course of the season. And so I'm pretty comfortable with the way we do it now in terms of kind of keeping it cranked up for conditioning purposes and other reasons into February. But then once we get to March and clearly April, we really dial it back. And then the other thing that we've really started to emphasize is it's part of the physiological approach, and some of our trainers and things, people that they use to train our guys physically have talked about this kind of, it's a form of periodization, but they call it like a randomization or undulation of our workout. So we've gotten to where we try to go hard day, easy day, hard day. So on Monday, Wednesday might be really intense, and Tuesday might be really light to get the legs back.
Interesting, very interesting. Tell me about your policy with technology. I mean, let me just put it out to you this way. One of the most challenging parts about being a college professor today is technology in the classroom. Now, technology can be a great thing, but when you see people starting to look in the palm of their hand at a smartphone more than they're looking at you,
right.
You got a challenge. Or, they're on their computer. The question is, are they writing notes or are they on Facebook? What is your policy about technology on game days and when you're traveling?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because from a player standpoint, we're fairly strict about it, and it is a distraction. I see it with my own kids in middle school and our players. When we're at a team meeting, no phones. You leave your phone in your locker. And we aren't allowed in our meeting room, whether it's a film session or it's just a team meeting or a scouting report or what have you. And then on game day, we basically eat our meal 4 hours beforehand, whether it's away game or home game, and then we report to the locker room 2 hours before the game to begin our kind of final reminders and warm up and things like that. And at that point, 2 hours before, our director of operations takes every single guy's phone.
Wow. Wow. And how do they respond, the freshmen? They just got to know it's coming?
Yeah, I mean, the first time we did it a couple of years ago, I got the idea from a friend of mine who coaches college football, and it just makes sense, kind of worst case scenario, some of these football guys are tweeting stuff out at halftime, and just humiliating your program, and kids are emotional. But more so, you just want them focused and thinking about the game. Not that you would assume they wouldn't, but you never know, and that just ensures that every single guy is at least not, texting his girlfriend or checking his Facebook account or things like that, and so we're trying to minimize the distractions as we get into the game.
What do you see? And every program, every sport is different, but what do you see the biggest challenges among your first-year student athletes when they come on campus and let's say they made it through fall ball or in this time of the month, this time of the year? We're in the finals now. So what are the biggest challenges that you're seeing among your staff is telling you that we had this player coming with that on and off the field?
I think the biggest thing, honestly, is time management. How to manage your time, and it's just such a contrast from high school where their whole day is structured for them. They wake up at 6:30 or whatever, go to school from 7:30 to 3, and go to practice, and then come home and do their homework. They don't have that structure now. They have 2 classes a day, maybe one at 10 and one at 1 or something, and then practice, and then so they go from like 10 hours of structure to maybe 4. And if they can manage those other 6 hours productively, they're going to be extremely successful here. But if they don't, they're going to really struggle, And really the other thing beyond time management is just pace. Both the pace in the classroom, they'll go through a full U.S. history in 1 semester instead of 2 or whatever the case may be, and also on the field, that just everything is moving faster from a lacrosse standpoint. So if they can, maintain their time management skills and adjust to the pace of things in college, they'll be successful. And we're seeing kids now, freshmen, that have to drop a class or get sick or, obviously getting more tutors and things like that. But these guys are competitive, and they're used to kind of stepping up to challenges, whether it's 8th grade to 9th grade or, 10th grade to 11th grade in the classroom. So by and large, our guys generally adjust pretty well, but it definitely hits them.
Coach, we have players out there or parents who maybe ninth graders, 10th graders, and they're thinking about Penn. What would you say to somebody who's interested in playing at Penn, what it takes? What would you say to them?
I would tell you it's a tremendous opportunity and investment in their future and the rest of their lives. And there's a lot of work. And if they want to work really hard to find out how good they can be as a lacrosse player and as a student and as a person, this might be the right place for them to come to school.
To check out our podcast archive, suggest show topics, and advertise on the show, and to book me as a guest and or speaker, visit our website, www.fredopie.com. That's www.fredopie.com. Thanks for listening, and be good.